Imagine this. It's 7 a.m. in Manhattan, and Sarah, a marketing executive, is already scrolling through LinkedIn before her feet hit the floor. Her heart races as she reads comments on her latest post, some praising her insights, others questioning her expertise. By the time she reaches her office on the 34th floor, she's already mentally rehearsing responses to critics she's never met, people whose opinions will dictate her mood for the entire day. 3 time zones away in Chicago, Marcus Yes, ironically named after the great emperor, sits in his startup's cramped office space, paralyzed by a decision that should take minutes. Should he pivot his business model? The idea excites him, but the fear of what his investors, his team, and even his college friends might think keeps him frozen. He's built a prison of other people's potential judgments, and he doesn't even realize he holds the key. This is the modern condition. Minds under siege, not by external armies, but by the relentless bombardment of opinions, expectations, and validations that flood our digital age. We live in a world where a stranger's comment can ruin our morning, where the fear of judgment can paralyze our dreams, and where we've somehow convinced ourselves that our worth is determined by metrics, likes, shares, comments, approval ratings from people we'll never meet. But here's what the ancient Stoics discovered over 2,000 years ago, a secret so powerful it can transform everything. The only thing truly within our control is ourselves, our reactions, our emotions, our thoughts. This isn't just philosophical poetry. It's the most practical, liberating truth you'll ever encounter. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who could have controlled vast armies and territories, understood something profound that we've forgotten. He wrote in his personal journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about that for a moment. The most powerful man in the ancient world found his greatest strength not in his legions or his wealth, but in mastering his own mind. This principle, what Stoics call the dichotomy of control, is your pathway to freedom. It's the difference between being a victim of circumstances and being the architect of your own experience. When you truly grasp that your peace of mind, your happiness, your sense of worth cannot be touched by external events or other people's opinions, you step into a power that no one can take away from you. Today, we're embarking on a journey that will show you how to reclaim your mental sovereignty. We'll explore how ancient Stoic wisdom can liberate you from the validation prison, help you master your emotions, transform your perspective, align with natural wisdom, develop unshakable discipline, embrace present moment power, and build meaningful community. Whether you're battling daily stresses in Los Angeles traffic, seeking deeper fulfillment in your Denver career, or simply wanting to live more authentically in our chaotic world, the Stoic path offers not just coping mechanisms, but a complete transformation of how you experience life itself. 1. Breaking free from the validation prison. Meet Jennifer, a 32-year-old creative director at a prestigious Los Angeles advertising agency. She's talented, accomplished, and by all external measures, successful. Yet every morning, she finds herself refreshing Instagram, counting likes on her latest project showcase, her mood rising and falling with each notification. When a former colleague comments that her latest campaign lacks originality, Jennifer spends the next 3 hours crafting and recrafting a response, then deletes it, then writes it again. She's trapped in what I call the validation prison, a mental cage where other people's opinions become the bars that confine our authentic selves. 3,000 miles away in Boston, David, a corporate lawyer, stands before his bathroom mirror each morning, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. Not because it's crooked, but because he's imagining what his clients might think if it's not perfect. He's changed law firms twice in 5 years, not because of better opportunities, but because he feared his colleagues were judging his performance. He's living his entire professional life through the lens of others' potential disapproval. This is the modern epidemic. We've become slaves to external validation, prisoners in cells we've built ourselves. But Marcus Aurelius, writing in his Meditations, offers us the key to freedom. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does. The emperor understood that true strength comes not from controlling others' opinions, an impossible task, but from liberating ourselves from the need for their approval. The Stoic principle here is revolutionary in its simplicity. Other people's opinions of you are not within your control, therefore they should not determine your actions or emotional state. Epictetus, who knew something about freedom having been born a slave, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. This includes the hurt that comes from disapproval, criticism, or rejection. But here's where most people misunderstand Stoicism. This isn't about becoming indifferent to others or developing a thick skin. It's about developing what the Stoics called ataraxia, unshakable tranquility that comes from anchoring your self-worth in your own values and virtuous actions rather than in external approval. Consider Marcus Aurelius again. As emperor, he was constantly surrounded by courtiers, advisors, and citizens, all with opinions about his decisions. Yet he wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." He understood that trying to please everyone is not just impossible. It's a betrayal of your authentic self. The practical application begins with what Seneca called the view from above. Stepping back and examining your motivations. Ask yourself, am I making this decision because it aligns with my values, or because I fear someone's judgment? When Jennifer in Los Angeles catches herself obsessing over social media comments, she can pause and ask, does this person's opinion reflect my actual performance, or am I giving them power over my emotional state? Here's a powerful Stoic exercise for breaking free from validation dependency. At the end of each day, identify 3 decisions you made. For each one, honestly assess whether it was driven by your authentic values or by the desire for approval. If it was the latter, don't judge yourself harshly, simply notice the pattern. Awareness is the first step to freedom. The Stoics also taught the importance of choosing your advisors wisely. This doesn't mean surrounding yourself with yes people, but rather distinguishing between constructive feedback from people you respect and random criticism from those who don't understand your goals or values. Marcus Aurelius valued the counsel of wise mentors but remained unmoved by the chatter of the crowd. In our digital age, this wisdom is more crucial than ever. Social media has created an illusion that everyone's opinion matters equally, but the Stoics would remind us that this is simply not true. The opinion of someone who shares your values, understands your context, and genuinely wants your growth carries weight. The opinion of a stranger on the internet who knows nothing about your life, your struggles, or your goals, that's just noise. Consider this reframe. Every time you catch yourself seeking validation, you're actually outsourcing your self-worth to people who may not have your best interests at heart. You're giving strangers the power to determine your happiness. As Epictetus taught, wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants. The same principle applies to validation. Freedom consists not in receiving endless approval, but in needing very little of it. David, our Boston lawyer, began practicing this by setting a judgment fast, 1 day per week, where he made decisions based solely on his own assessment of what was right and effective, without considering others' potential reactions. He discovered that not only did his confidence increase, but his actual performance improved because he was no longer second-guessing every move. The ultimate Stoic insight here is that when you stop desperately seeking approval, you often end up earning more genuine respect. People are drawn to authenticity, to individuals who stand firmly in their own values. As Marcus Aurelius observed, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. In our context, the best response to judgment is not to become judgmental ourselves, but to remain centered in our own integrity. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of all feedback. The Stoic cultivates what we might call confident humility, secure enough in your own worth to receive criticism without being destroyed by it, and wise enough to extract value from it without being controlled by it. Remember, every moment you spend worrying about others' opinions is a moment stolen from building the life you actually want to live. The validation prison only has power if you keep feeding it with your attention and emotional energy. The Stoics discovered that true freedom comes not from controlling others' thoughts about you, but from controlling your own response to their thoughts. 2. Mastering your emotional landscape. It's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday in Seattle, and Michael, a software engineer at a major tech company, stares at his laptop screen in disbelief. The email is brief but devastating. Due to restructuring, your position has been eliminated. Your last day will be Friday. His heart pounds, his palms sweat, and a familiar wave of panic washes over him. His mind immediately spirals. How will I pay my mortgage? What will my wife think? I'm a failure. But then he remembers something he learned about Stoic philosophy. Emotions aren't commands that must be obeyed. 2,000 miles away in Miami, Dr. Elena Rodriguez faces her own emotional challenge. She's an emergency room physician, and today she's dealing with her third hostile patient in 4 hours. The man is screaming at her, questioning her competence, demanding a different doctor. Her natural impulse is to feel hurt, to take it personally, to let his anger ignite her own. Instead, she takes a breath and applies a principle she learned from the ancient Stoics. Emotions are information, not instructions. This is where Stoicism reveals one of its most practical and transformative insights. We don't have to be slaves to our emotional reactions. The Stoics didn't teach emotional suppression. That's a dangerous misunderstanding of their philosophy. Instead, they taught emotional intelligence, the art of understanding, processing, and directing our emotions in service of wisdom and virtue. Seneca, who knew something about intense emotions having survived political intrigue and personal setbacks, wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." He understood that what we often perceive as disasters can become doorways to growth. This wasn't naive optimism, but a sophisticated understanding of how to transform our relationship with adversity. The Stoic approach to emotional mastery begins with a fundamental shift in perspective. Obstacles are not roadblocks but training equipment for the soul. When Michael received that termination email, his initial emotional response was natural and human. But Seneca would encourage him to ask, how can this situation help me practice courage, resilience, and wisdom? Perhaps this forced transition will lead him to a better opportunity, or teach him skills he didn't know he needed, or strengthen his relationship with his wife as they navigate challenges together. Epictetus, who understood suffering intimately, taught one of the most liberating concepts in all of philosophy. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. This isn't about denying reality or pretending everything is fine. It's about recognizing that our emotional suffering often comes not from events themselves, but from the stories we tell ourselves about those events. Consider Dr. Rodriguez in Miami. The objective facts are: a patient is expressing anger and dissatisfaction, but she has choices about how to interpret this. She could tell herself, "He thinks I'm incompetent. I'm a terrible doctor. I chose the wrong profession." Or she could reframe it. "This person is in pain, frightened, and expressing it poorly. My job is to help him, not to take his emotional state personally." Same situation, completely different emotional experience. The Stoics developed practical techniques for this emotional reframing. One powerful method is what modern psychologists call cognitive distancing, but the Stoics simply called wisdom. When you feel overwhelmed by emotion, step back and observe it as if you were a scientist studying an interesting phenomenon. I notice I'm feeling anxiety about this presentation. What is this emotion trying to tell me? Is it pointing to something I need to prepare? Or is it simply fear of judgment that I can acknowledge and set aside? Marcus Aurelius practiced this in his personal writings. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. He learned to observe his own emotional reactions without being controlled by them. This is the crucial distinction. You can feel anger without becoming angry, experience fear without being fearful, notice sadness without being consumed by it. Here's a practical Stoic exercise for emotional mastery. When you feel a strong emotion, pause and ask 3 questions. First, what is this emotion telling me about the situation? Sometimes anger reveals an injustice that needs addressing, or fear points to a real danger requiring preparation. Second, is my emotional response proportional to the actual threat or challenge? Often our emotions are calibrated to ancient survival needs, not modern office politics. Third, how can I respond to this situation in a way that reflects my values rather than just my feelings? The Stoics also understood that emotional resilience isn't built through comfort but through practice. Seneca regularly practiced voluntary discomfort, sleeping on hard floors, eating simple food, wearing basic clothes, not as punishment but as training. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" In our modern context, this might mean deliberately practicing patience in long lines, maintaining composure during difficult conversations, or staying calm when technology fails. Each small practice builds the emotional muscle memory that serves you when real challenges arise. Michael in Seattle eventually found that his job loss led to a career pivot that doubled his salary and gave him work he actually enjoyed. Dr. Rodriguez discovered that her most difficult patients often became her most grateful ones once she learned to see past their fear to their humanity. Neither of them achieved this transformation by suppressing their emotions, but by learning to work with them skillfully. The ultimate Stoic insight about emotions is this: they are powerful allies when properly directed, but tyrannical masters when allowed to run unchecked. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Your emotions are part of your mind, and therefore part of what you can learn to direct wisely. 3. The revolutionary power of perspective. It's 5:30 p.m. on a Friday in Denver, and Tom is trapped in what locals call the parking lot, I-25 during rush hour. He's been sitting in the same spot for 20 minutes, watching his GPS estimate creep from 15 minutes to 45 minutes to 1 hour 12 minutes. His hands grip the steering wheel as he imagines his wife's disappointment when he misses their dinner reservation, the one they made 6 weeks ago to celebrate their anniversary. His mind races with catastrophic scenarios. She'll think I don't prioritize our relationship. This will ruin our entire evening. I'm such a failure as a husband. But then Tom remembers something he learned about Stoic philosophy. He takes a deep breath and asks himself a different question. What if this traffic jam is actually a gift? Suddenly, he notices the spectacular view of the Rocky Mountains painted gold by the setting sun. He calls his wife, explains the situation, and they spend the next hour having the most intimate conversation they've had in months. When he finally arrives, she greets him with a smile. That was the best pre-dinner conversation we've ever had. 3 time zones away in Phoenix, Maria sits in her manager's office, her annual performance review spread across the desk. The feedback stings. Needs improvement in client communication. Sometimes appears defensive when receiving feedback. Her first instinct is to feel attacked, to mentally rehearse all the ways her manager is wrong, to catalog every unfair criticism she's endured. But Maria has been studying Stoic philosophy, and she recognizes this moment as an opportunity to practice one of its most powerful principles: the transformation of perspective. This is where Stoicism reveals its most revolutionary insight. We don't experience reality directly. We experience our interpretation of reality. And since we control our interpretations, we have far more power over our experience than we typically realize. Epictetus, who understood this principle deeply, taught, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." This isn't philosophical wordplay. It's a practical blueprint for emotional freedom. The Stoic practice of perspective transformation begins with a simple but profound recognition. Every situation contains multiple possible interpretations, and we have the power to choose which one we adopt. This isn't about delusional thinking or pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing that our initial emotional reaction to events is often based on incomplete information and conditioned responses rather than careful analysis. Consider Marcus Aurelius, who faced plagues, wars, political betrayals, and personal losses during his reign. He could have interpreted these challenges as evidence that the universe was against him, that leadership was a burden, that life was fundamentally unfair. Instead, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He trained himself to see obstacles not as roadblocks but as raw material for building character and wisdom. This perspective shift requires what the Stoics called prosoche, continuous attention to our mental processes. It means catching ourselves in the moment when we're about to adopt a destructive interpretation and asking, is this the only way to see this situation? What would someone I admire see here? How might this apparent setback actually serve my long-term growth? Let's return to Maria in Phoenix. Her manager's feedback could be interpreted as an attack on her competence, confirmation of her inadequacy, or evidence that her workplace is toxic. But Maria chooses a different lens. This feedback is valuable information about how I'm being perceived. It's an opportunity to develop skills that will make me more effective. My manager took time to help me improve. That's actually a sign that they believe in my potential. The Stoics developed specific techniques for this perspective work. One powerful method is what Seneca called the view from above, imagining how the current situation will look from a broader temporal or spatial perspective. Will Tom's traffic jam matter in a week, in a year, in the context of his entire marriage? When we zoom out, many of our daily frustrations reveal themselves as temporary inconveniences rather than life-defining catastrophes. Another Stoic technique is the practice of memento mori, remembering mortality not to become morbid, but to maintain perspective on what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." When we remember that our time is limited, we naturally prioritize our own values over others' judgments. Consider this real-world application. James, an Atlanta-based sales manager, was recently passed over for a promotion he'd been expecting for months. His initial interpretation was devastating. "I'm not good enough. My career is stalled. I wasted 2 years at this company." But practicing Stoic perspective work, he reframed the situation. "This gives me time to develop skills I wouldn't have focused on otherwise. Maybe there's a better opportunity waiting that I wouldn't have been open to if I'd gotten this promotion. I can use this disappointment as motivation to become even more valuable." The key insight here is that perspective isn't just about positive thinking. It's about accurate thinking. The Stoics were realists who understood that life contains genuine difficulties, losses, and setbacks. But they also understood that we often make our suffering worse through catastrophic interpretations, all-or-nothing thinking, and attachment to outcomes beyond our control. Epictetus taught his students to distinguish between what is up to us and what is not up to us. The traffic jam is not up to Tom. The manager's feedback is not up to Maria. The promotion decision is not up to James. But their responses to these situations, their interpretations, their emotional reactions, their subsequent choices, these are entirely within their control. This practice of perspective transformation isn't a one-time shift but a daily discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself in your way of thinking." Each morning, we can choose to approach the day's challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats to our peace. Each evening, we can reflect on how our interpretations shaped our experience and practice seeing events through the lens of wisdom rather than immediate emotion. The revolutionary power of perspective lies not in changing what happens to us, but in changing what we make it mean. And in that transformation of meaning, we discover our true freedom. 4. Aligning with nature's wisdom. At 6 a.m. in San Francisco, Alex stares out the window of his luxury downtown apartment, surrounded by the latest tech gadgets, designer furniture, and all the markers of Silicon Valley success. He's a senior product manager at a major tech company, earning more money at 28 than his parents made in their best years combined. Yet he feels hollow, disconnected, like he's living someone else's definition of success. His days blur together in an endless cycle of meetings, metrics, and the relentless pursuit of the next promotion, the next acquisition, the next dopamine hit from achieving arbitrary goals that seem to multiply faster than he can complete them. 2,000 miles away in Portland, Sarah faces a different but related struggle. She's an environmental lawyer who got into her field to make a difference, but she's drowning in billable hours, client demands, and the pressure to maintain a lifestyle that requires her to work 60-hour weeks. She barely has time to enjoy the natural beauty of Oregon that originally drew her to the city. She feels like she's fighting for the environment during the day while living in a way that disconnects her from it entirely. Both Alex and Sarah are experiencing what the Stoics would recognize as a fundamental misalignment with nature, not just the physical environment, but the deeper natural order that governs human flourishing. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his Meditations, captured this perfectly. Constantly regard the universe as one living being, having one substance and one soul. All things are mutually woven together and the bond is sacred. But here's where most people misunderstand the Stoic concept of living according to nature. It's not about becoming a hermit or rejecting technology. It's about recognizing and aligning with the fundamental principles that govern human thriving, principles that remain constant regardless of whether you live in ancient Rome or modern Manhattan. The Stoics understood that humans are rational, social beings designed for virtue and community. Our nature is to use reason, to act with justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom, and to contribute to the common good. When we live in ways that contradict these fundamental aspects of human nature, we experience the psychological equivalent of swimming against a powerful current, exhausting, frustrating, and ultimately unsustainable. Consider what happened when Alex began applying Stoic principles to his high-pressure tech career. Instead of abandoning his job, he started asking different questions. Is this project aligned with my deeper values? Am I using my talents to create something genuinely useful or just to generate profit? How can I contribute to my team's well-being while pursuing professional goals? This wasn't about becoming less ambitious, it was about ensuring his ambitions served his authentic nature rather than fighting against it. Seneca, who was himself wealthy and politically powerful, understood this balance. He wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." Living according to nature means distinguishing between genuine needs and artificially manufactured desires. Alex realized that many of his needs, the expensive apartment, the luxury car, the constant dining out, were actually keeping him trapped in a cycle that prevented him from living according to his deeper nature. The practical application of this principle begins with what the Stoics called self-examination, regularly asking yourself whether your current lifestyle and choices align with your fundamental nature as a rational, social, virtuous being. This isn't about judgment or guilt, but about honest assessment and gradual realignment. Sarah in Portland discovered this when she started practicing what Marcus Aurelius called morning reflection. Each day before checking her phone or diving into work, she would spend 10 minutes asking, how can I live today in a way that honors both my professional responsibilities and my deeper nature? She began taking walking meetings when possible, choosing cases that aligned with her values even if they paid less, and setting boundaries that allowed her to actually experience the natural environment she was working to protect. The Stoics also taught that living according to nature means accepting the natural rhythms and cycles of life. Marcus Aurelius observe constantly that all things take place by change, and accustom yourself to consider that the nature of the universe loves nothing so much as to change the things which are. This means working with the natural ebb and flow of energy, seasons, and life circumstances rather than fighting against them. In our modern context, this might mean recognizing that you naturally have more creative energy at certain times of day and structuring your schedule accordingly. It might mean accepting that some seasons of life are for building and others for rest. It could mean acknowledging that your body and mind need regular renewal, not as weakness, but as alignment with natural law. Consider Marcus, a Nashville musician who was burning out trying to maintain a constant creative output. When he learned about Stoic principles of natural living, he began to structure his life around natural rhythms, writing songs in the morning when his mind was fresh, performing in the evening when his energy was more social, and taking regular periods of rest and reflection. Paradoxically, by working less frantically, he became more productive and fulfilled. The Stoics also emphasized that living according to nature means embracing simplicity, not as deprivation but as clarity about what truly matters. Epictetus taught, wealth consists in not having great possessions but in having few wants. This doesn't mean living in poverty, but rather distinguishing between what you need for genuine flourishing and what you want because of social conditioning or advertising. Alex in San Francisco began practicing this by conducting what he called nature audits, regularly examining his possessions, commitments, and habits to ask, does this serve my authentic nature, or is it just noise? He discovered that many of his expensive purchases were attempts to fill a void that could only be satisfied by living more authentically. He downsized his apartment, simplified his wardrobe, and found that with fewer possessions demanding his attention, he had more energy for relationships, creativity, and meaningful work. The ultimate insight of living according to nature is that it's not about following a set of external rules, but about discovering and honoring the deepest principles of human flourishing. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, what brings no benefit to the hive can bring none to the bee. When we align our individual lives with our fundamental nature as rational, social, virtuous beings, we not only find personal peace but also contribute to the well-being of our communities and the world. 5. The discipline of virtuous action. It's 5:15 a.m. in Houston and the alarm clock pierces through the darkness of Jake's bedroom. He's a refinery supervisor who's been trying to get his health back on track after his doctor warned him about his blood pressure and cholesterol levels. The easy choice would be to hit snooze, grab coffee and a breakfast taco on the way to work and promise himself he'll start tomorrow. But Jake has been studying Stoic philosophy and he's learned that self-discipline isn't about willpower, it's about aligning your daily actions with your deepest values, even when it's inconvenient. He rolls out of bed, laces up his running shoes, and heads into the humid Texas morning. As he runs through his neighborhood, he reflects on something Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Each step he takes is both an ending of old habits that were slowly killing him and a beginning of the person he's choosing to become. Meanwhile, in Detroit, Lisa faces her own moment of choice. She's an automotive engineer who's been struggling with financial discipline for years. Her credit cards are maxed out not from necessities, but from a pattern of emotional spending that leaves her feeling temporarily better but financially worse. Today, she's standing in Target holding a designer handbag that she absolutely doesn't need, feeling that familiar urge to buy something to fill the void left by a stressful week at work. But Lisa has been practicing what the Stoics called prosoke, continuous attention to her mental processes. She pauses and asks herself, is buying this bag aligned with my values of financial independence and security? Or am I trying to solve an emotional problem with a financial transaction? She puts the bag back and walks out of the store, feeling a different kind of satisfaction, the deep contentment that comes from acting in harmony with her authentic values rather than her immediate impulses. This is the essence of Stoic self-discipline. It's not about deprivation or punishment, but about the freedom that comes from being the author of your own actions rather than a slave to your impulses. Seneca, who understood this principle deeply, wrote, "No person was ever honored for what he received. Honor has been the reward for what he gave." Self-discipline is ultimately about giving your future self the gift of a life lived with intention and integrity. The Stoics understood that true self-discipline begins with clarity about your values. You can't align your actions with your principles if you haven't clearly identified what those principles are. This requires what Marcus Aurelius called morning reflection, regularly examining what you truly believe matters most in life, not what society tells you should matter, but what resonates with your deepest sense of purpose and meaning. Jake in Houston discovered this when he realized that his health goals weren't really about looking good or even feeling better. They were about being present and energetic for his family, modeling good habits for his children, and honoring his body as the vehicle for everything else he wanted to accomplish in life. Once he connected his daily discipline to these deeper values, the 5:15 a.m. alarm became less of a burden and more of a call to action. The Stoics also taught that self-discipline is a practice, not a destination. Epictetus, who knew something about overcoming limitations having been born a slave, emphasized that discipline is built through small, consistent choices rather than dramatic gestures. He taught his students, "No great thing is created suddenly." This means that sustainable self-discipline comes from making slightly better choices consistently, not from trying to transform your entire life overnight. Consider Maria, a Las Vegas hospitality manager who was struggling with the temptation to compromise her values in an industry where cutting corners and bending rules often seem like the path to success. She began practicing what she called micro-integrity, making small choices throughout each day that aligned with her values, even when no one was watching. She started arriving 5 minutes early to meetings, following through completely on small commitments, and speaking honestly even when it would be easier to tell people what they wanted to hear. These small practices built what the Stoics called hexis, a stable disposition toward virtue that becomes second nature through repetition. As Aristotle noted and the Stoics embraced, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Maria found that as she practiced integrity in small matters, it became increasingly natural to maintain her standards in larger, more challenging situations. The Stoics also understood that self-discipline isn't just about personal benefit, it's about contributing to the common good. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive can bring none to the bee." When we develop the discipline to act according to our values rather than our impulses, we become more reliable, trustworthy, and beneficial to our communities. This principle transforms how we think about discipline. It's not about being hard on yourself, it's about being someone others can count on. When Jake maintains his exercise routine, he's not just improving his own health, he's modeling resilience for his children and ensuring he'll be physically capable of supporting his family for years to come. When Lisa practices financial discipline, she's not just improving her own security, she's avoiding the stress and relationship strain that financial chaos creates for everyone around her. One of the most powerful Stoic practices for developing discipline is what Seneca called voluntary discomfort, deliberately practicing small inconveniences to build your capacity for handling larger challenges. This might mean taking cold showers, walking instead of driving when possible, or eating simple meals occasionally. The goal isn't suffering for its own sake, but building what we might call disciplined muscle memory, the automatic ability to choose the harder but better path when it matters most. The ultimate insight about Stoic self-discipline is that it's actually a form of self-respect. Every time you choose your values over your impulses, you're declaring that your future self, your relationships, and your principles matter more than temporary comfort or pleasure. As Seneca observed, the willing destiny guides them. The unwilling destiny drags them. Self-discipline is how we become willing participants in creating the life we actually want rather than passive victims of our circumstances and impulses. 6. The power of present moment mastery. It's 8:47 a.m. in the bustling financial district of New York City, and Rebecca sits at her desk surrounded by 3 monitors displaying stock charts, email notifications pinging every few seconds, her phone buzzing with text messages, and her mind racing between the presentation she's giving at 10 a.m., the client call at 2 p.m., and the dinner she forgot to plan for her in-laws visiting this weekend. She's physically present in her office, but mentally she's scattered across a dozen different time zones of worry and anticipation. Her coffee grows cold as she frantically switches between tasks, accomplishing little while feeling overwhelmed by everything. This is the modern condition, bodies anchored in the present while minds race frantically between regrets about the past and anxieties about the future. We've become temporal refugees everywhere except where we actually are. But Marcus Aurelius, writing nearly 2,000 years ago, understood something profound about the nature of time and attention that could transform Rebecca's entire experience. Confine yourself to the present. 3,000 miles away in a Philadelphia elementary school, Mr. Johnson faces his own challenge with presence. He's been teaching 4th grade for 8 years, but lately he finds himself going through the motions, thinking about his weekend plans while explaining fractions, mentally rehearsing difficult conversations with his principal while his students share their creative writing. He's realized that his physical presence isn't enough. His students deserve his full attention, and he's been giving them only fragments of his awareness. The Stoic practice of present moment mastery isn't about meditation retreats or mystical experiences, it's about the practical recognition that the present moment is the only time when we actually have any power. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, time is like a river of passing events, and its current is swift. No sooner does anything appear than it has swept by, and another comes in its place, and that too will be swept away. The past is beyond our influence, the future hasn't arrived yet, but right now, this moment, is where all our actual power resides. This insight transforms how we approach productivity and effectiveness. Instead of trying to multitask our way through life, the Stoics advocated what we might call monotasking with presence, doing one thing at a time with complete attention and engagement. Marcus Aurelius practiced this principle even as emperor, writing, "In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present, I am rising to the work of a human being." Each task, no matter how mundane, became an opportunity to practice excellence and presence. Rebecca began applying this principle by implementing what she called attention anchors throughout her day. Instead of checking email while on phone calls, she gave each conversation her complete focus. Instead of planning her presentation while reviewing reports, she dedicated specific time blocks to each activity. Paradoxically, she discovered that doing less simultaneously allowed her to accomplish more effectively. Her presentations became more compelling because she was fully present while preparing them. Her client relationships improved because people could sense when they had her complete attention. The Stoics understood that present moment awareness isn't just about productivity, it's about the quality of experience itself. Seneca wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." When we're fully present, even ordinary activities become rich with meaning and satisfaction. The taste of morning coffee, the feeling of sunlight through a window, the sound of a colleague's laughter, these simple pleasures are available to us constantly, but only when we're actually here to experience them. Mr. Johnson discovered this when he began practicing what he called teaching presence. Instead of going through the motions of his lesson plans, he started each class by taking 3 deep breaths and setting an intention to be fully available to his students. He noticed things he'd been missing for years, the way Sarah's face lit up when she finally understood a math concept, the creative insights that emerged when he gave students space to think rather than rushing to fill silence. The genuine joy that came from witnessing young minds discover new ideas. The practice of present moment mastery also involves what the Stoics called accepting what is not passive resignation, but active engagement with reality as it actually exists rather than as we wish it were. Epictetus taught, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well." This doesn't mean we can't work to improve situations, but it means we start from a clear-eyed acceptance of current circumstances rather than fighting against reality. Consider David, a Chicago construction foreman who was constantly frustrated by weather delays, supply chain issues, and the dozen daily complications that come with managing large projects. He learned to apply Stoic present moment principles by asking himself each morning, what are the actual conditions I'm working with today? Instead of wasting energy being angry about rain or delayed deliveries, he focused on what could be accomplished given current realities. This shift in attention not only reduced his stress but made him more effective at finding creative solutions to unexpected problems. The Stoics also taught that present moment awareness includes mindful attention to our own mental processes. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced what we might call meta-awareness, observing his own thoughts and emotions as they arose. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This means noticing when your mind drifts into worry about the future or rumination about the past and gently redirecting attention to what's actually happening right now. A practical exercise for developing this skill is what I call the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. When you notice your mind scattered or overwhelmed, pause and identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This simple practice immediately anchors your attention in present moment sensory experience, creating space for clearer thinking and more intentional action. The ultimate insight of present moment mastery is that it's not about perfection, it's about returning. Your mind will wander, that's what minds do. The practice is in noticing when attention has drifted and gently bringing it back to the present. As Marcus Aurelius observed, the present moment is the only time over which we have dominion. Each moment offers a fresh opportunity to choose presence over distraction, engagement over autopilot, and intentional action over reactive behavior. 7. Building your Stoic community. It's 7 p.m. on a Wednesday evening in Minneapolis, and James sits alone in his downtown apartment, staring at his laptop screen. He's been working remotely as a data analyst for 2 years now, and while he appreciates the flexibility, he's realized something troubling. He can go entire days without meaningful human interaction beyond Slack messages and Zoom calls. He's been studying Stoic philosophy for months, finding wisdom in Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, but he's practicing it in isolation. He's beginning to understand that something essential is missing, the community aspect that the ancient Stoics considered fundamental to human flourishing. Across the country in San Diego, Margaret faces a different but related challenge. She's a recently retired teacher who moved to Southern California to be closer to her daughter's family. She has plenty of time now, but she feels disconnected from purpose. She's been reading about Stoicism and finding it helpful for navigating the transition to retirement, but she longs for others who share these interests, people with whom she can discuss these ideas and put them into practice in meaningful ways. Both James and Margaret are experiencing what Marcus Aurelius would have recognized as a fundamental misalignment with human nature. The emperor-philosopher wrote, "We were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower." The Stoics understood that humans are inherently social beings, not just by preference, but by design. Virtue, they taught, is not a solitary pursuit, but something that flourishes in community with others. This insight challenges a common misconception about Stoicism, that it's about becoming emotionally detached or self-sufficient to the point of isolation. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics believed that our highest human capacity is expressed through relationships, through contributing to the common good, and through the mutual support that comes from shared values and purpose. Seneca, despite his wealth and political position, maintained deep friendships throughout his life and wrote extensively about the importance of community. He observed, "No person was ever honored for what he received. Honor has been the reward for what he gave." This principle transforms how we think about community, not as something we join to get support, but as something we build by offering our own gifts and virtues in service of others. James in Minneapolis began addressing his isolation by taking a counterintuitive approach. Instead of looking for a ready-made community to join, he decided to create one. He started a monthly meetup called Practical Philosophy and posted about it on local social media groups and community boards. The first meeting drew only 3 people, but they had such a rich discussion about applying Stoic principles to modern challenges that word began to spread. Within 6 months, the group had grown to 20 regular members who met twice monthly, once for discussion and once for community service projects. What James discovered is that building community around shared values creates deeper connections than bonding over shared complaints or entertainment. When people come together with the intention of becoming better versions of themselves and contributing to something larger, the relationships that form have a different quality, more supportive, more honest, more resilient. Margaret in San Diego took a different but equally effective approach. She began volunteering at a local literacy center, teaching adults to read. This wasn't explicitly a Stoic community, but she found that the values she was learning, patience, service, focusing on what she could control, naturally attracted like-minded people. She started conversations about philosophy during breaks, shared book recommendations, and gradually built relationships with other volunteers who were interested in living more intentionally. The Stoics taught that community service isn't separate from personal development, it's essential to it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive can bring none to the bee." When we contribute to the well-being of others, we develop virtues that we simply can't cultivate in isolation. Patience, compassion, leadership, humility, these qualities emerge and strengthen through interaction with others, especially when we're working toward shared goals. Consider the story of Carlos, a Phoenix-based entrepreneur who was struggling with the isolation that comes with starting a business. He'd been reading Stoic philosophy to help manage the stress and uncertainty, but he realized he needed to practice these principles in community. He started what he called a Stoic Entrepreneurs Circle, a monthly gathering where business owners could discuss challenges through the lens of ancient wisdom. The group developed practices that would have made Marcus Aurelius proud. They began each meeting with a few minutes of reflection on the question, how can I serve my customers and community better this month? They practiced honest self-examination, sharing not just successes but failures and the lessons learned from them. They held each other accountable for living according to their stated values, not just pursuing profit. What emerged was something more powerful than a networking group. It was a community of mutual accountability and support that helped each member become not just more successful, but more virtuous. When one member's business failed, the group rallied to help him find new opportunities. When another faced an ethical dilemma, the community helped him think through the decision using Stoic principles. The digital age offers unique opportunities for building Stoic communities. Online forums, social media groups, and virtual meetups can connect people across geographical boundaries. But the Stoics would remind us that virtual connection, while valuable, shouldn't replace face-to-face interaction. There's something irreplaceable about being physically present with others who share your commitment to growth and virtue. The key to building authentic Stoic community is understanding that it's not about finding perfect people or avoiding conflict. Marcus Aurelius dealt with difficult senators, incompetent generals, and family members who didn't share his philosophical interests. The Stoic approach to community isn't about surrounding yourself with people who think exactly as you do, but about practicing virtue in relationship with real, flawed, complex human beings. This means approaching community building with what the Stoics called philanthropia, love of humanity that includes patience with human weakness and commitment to mutual growth. As Seneca wrote, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Building community often means ending patterns of isolation, superficial connection, or waiting for others to take the first step. The practical steps are simpler than you might think. Identify your values, look for others who share them, and begin offering service before seeking support. Whether it's starting a book club, joining a volunteer organization, or simply being more intentional about deepening existing relationships. The path to Stoic community begins with the decision to prioritize connection and contribution over comfort and convenience. As we reach the end of our exploration today, I want you to imagine something powerful. Picture yourself 6 months from now walking through your city, whether it's the bustling streets of Manhattan, the sun-soaked avenues of Los Angeles, or the tree-lined neighborhoods of Portland. But this time, you're different. You're no longer at the mercy of every opinion, every setback, every unexpected challenge that life throws your way. You've internalized what Marcus Aurelius knew when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That strength isn't theoretical anymore, it's woven into the fabric of your daily experience. When traffic jams happen, you see opportunities for reflection. When criticism comes, you extract the valuable lessons while remaining unshaken by the noise. When obstacles appear, you recognize them as Seneca did, as training equipment for your character. This transformation isn't about becoming emotionally numb or indifferent to the world around you. It's about becoming more fully human, more present, more intentional, more connected to what truly matters. The Stoic path we've explored today offers something our modern world desperately needs. A way to live with both strength and compassion, ambition and contentment, engagement and inner peace. Remember Sarah from Los Angeles, who broke free from the validation prison? Tom from Denver, who transformed his perspective on life's delays? Michael from Seattle, who learned to master his emotional responses? These aren't fictional characters, they represent the real transformation that's possible when you apply these ancient principles to your modern life. The beauty of Stoicism is that it doesn't require you to retreat from the world or abandon your goals. Instead, it teaches you to engage more skillfully, to pursue your ambitions from a place of inner strength rather than desperate need, to build relationships based on genuine virtue rather than mutual dependence on external validation. But here's the crucial point: this transformation doesn't happen by accident. It requires what the Stoics called ascesis, deliberate practice. Start small. Choose one principle we've discussed today and commit to practicing it for the next week. Maybe it's catching yourself when you seek validation from others. Perhaps it's reframing one challenging situation each day. Or it could be as simple as taking 3 conscious breaths before reacting to difficult news. As Seneca wisely observed, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Today can be the end of living at the mercy of circumstances and the beginning of living as the author of your own experience. The ancient Stoics believed that philosophy wasn't meant to be studied in isolation but shared in community. That's exactly what we're building here at Stoic Vivu, a community of people committed to applying timeless wisdom to modern challenges. If these insights have resonated with you, if you're ready to begin your own Stoic transformation, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and share this video with someone who could benefit from these teachings. Your journey to mental mastery begins with a single step. Take it today.